Friends, welcome back to the Messed Up Movies Podcast, a podcast celebrating movies and filmmakers that embrace the unhinged, the insane, the outrageous, the off-kilter, and the all-around kind of messed up fun you can't take your eyes off of. Welcome, everybody. I'm your host, Griffey, joined as always by my friend, co-host, and guy with just beautifully streaked hair.
Oh, Alex Dandino. Friends, do you like podcasts? Because we got a lot. We got a lot going on over here. Not That's just true. This podcast. We've got two others weekly. That's weekly, my friends. Weekly, you could get a Filmmaker Friday and a new movie Monday, along with this lovely show, the Messed Up Movies Podcast. There's a lot of cool shit going on. I don't know. We got a lot of fun stuff coming up. Also, if you don't want to miss any of that action, every single social media other than Red Note that is available out there.
We might have vowed to Red Note by now.
We have not submitted to the Chinese overlords yet, but we'll see.
We're about to. We're about to. This is the thing. We are recording this at the moment in history before TikTok may or may not disappear.
Yes, this is the inflection point.
The American government may have fucked up and shown us that it's all a ruse and that we're just submitting to the Chinese authority. That's up to them. They'll figure this out. So this is kind of weird. In the future, you'll know whether this was a fool's errand or not.
My original English name is Alex Dandino. And
not for long, bitch.
Anywho, if you like movies, you find us on Messed Up Movies. You find us on misfitparade. Is it com now? We are
.com. Misfitparade.com.
Misfitparade.com. We've got lots of cool stuff over there. Please go check out the Messed Up Movies Patreon. The Patreon for $1. That's $1. Like just $1 a month. You get access to all of our exclusive shit, and you get access to our very fun Discord where we post about how David Lynch died and a bunch of other stuff generally. But
miserable
again.
R.I.P. to the legend.
Was horrible.
Dude. It was nice though to have a couple people to find solace in. Yeah. So at this time, we have tiers where you can get all kinds of amazing stuff, different things at different tiers. We have our Black Mirror miniseries that started by the time you hear this. If you go to misfitparade.com, you will see all of the behind-the-scenes stuff we have on the newest segment for Mr. Cream Jeans Hidey Hole that we will be wrapping right as this is airing. So tons of awesome stuff for you to please check out. Let your friends know. All the good stuff. Alex.
Yeah.
Be Still My Heart. The month of Amour here on the Messed Up Movies Podcast. We are going with maybe the most classic and iconic film we could pick for this undead romance curation, The Bride of Frankenstein. Ooh, Frankenstein is, to me, one of the most beautiful, perfect films ever made. The sequel is also interesting. It has become so visually iconic, and there are things from this sequel that are so iconic in people's minds. What I think is fun when you revisit it, it's so much goofier than you remember. There is a bizarre flavor and tone at the core of this. But I think the other most obvious element in addition to this, besides the bride, who becomes iconic in essentially 0% of the movie. She's in the flashes at the very end. She's not really a key part of the movie that has her name in the title. But what you do see is this deepening, this expanding depth of the monster, right? So I love this movie. I do think it has aged in a more unusual way. That's mostly Pretorius' fault. He knows what he did. So would you like to hit us with the key information on said film?
Of course. As Griffey said, it's Bride of Frankenstein. 1935, directed by James Whale, who originally directed the original Frankenstein. Of course, starring Karloff, who, as he was billed after the original Frankenstein, up through, I think, the 40s or 50s, he got single last name billing on most movies.
That's right.
People just knew he was Karloff. And then, of course, Elsa Lanchester as not just the bride, but also at the very beginning of the movie, Mary Shelley.
Mary Shelley, that's right.
I did look up. For some reason, I always thought that this was the first sequel, but it's not. But it was one of the early ones, I'll say that.
Mm-hmm.
The first sequel that people... Googling it was odd. The first sequel apparently is the sequel to Birth of a Nation. I'm like, yikes. All right. I didn't know we needed to follow up on that.
Yeah. We still had hate in our heart we needed to pour out, and it's like, good Lord.
Yeah. Yeah, so released in 1930.
Why are racists always so prolific? Why do they always just... So much energy. If only they could channel that for good.
This is the thing I really love about movies from like this era, though, because the production schedules were the production schedules, and like again, you didn't have a lot of. You weren't releasing movies the way we release movies now. This movie, principal photography, began in January of 1935, and it was released in April of 1935.
God. They're just like shooting chronological, send that shit over next door, day up. Just, yeah, that, it is one of those movies you are struck by, like even the very opening scene where Lord Byron's just over there fucking being a sack of shit by the window. It's like, hey man, can you just shut the fuck up and let us chill, right? Like we want to hear the storm and like enjoy the fire. You're over here to like just doing fucking soliloquies, like annoying ass soliloquies.
You trying to get down? You trying to get down on this guy's girl? What is the matter with you?
Yeah. But that set, right? They push in on like a beautiful mini of like a forest and a, mansion on a hill as it's storming. And when they push in, the sets that look like they would have like 50-foot tall giant ceilings, you're like, they really just, it is a visual aesthetic we don't get very much anymore. And it's wonderful, man. It's incredible. So Alex, walk me through this. Undead brides are now almost a subgenre unto themselves in cinema. Tons and tons and tons of undead brides. What about the Bride of Frankenstein makes her the one that we all think to, right? Like you could argue Bella Baxter is like on the block now. But really the Bride of Frankenstein is the visual icon of this genre, right? The posters, the shirts. She is barely in this fucking movie. Why is the Bride of Frankenstein the queen of the undead brides?
I think a lot of it boils down to a visual aesthetic. Like James Whale had quite the thought. Just giving the little Polly Walnuts
Polly Wall, dude.
Temples. I think it's a lot about visuals. Mm-hmm. I think the other thing is from a contextual standpoint, the birth of the creation of a mate is such an intrinsic value to who we are as human beings. Like when you create in Frankenstein, we create a human being who people are repulsed by. Mm-hmm. So they feel alone in the world. To have another person, and it's weird actually, we're talking about Bride of Frankenstein. It's strange because I just finished I just finished the Creature Commandos show on Max. And again, David Harbour plays Frankenstein, who's literally spending like his entire he is like the worst jilted lover because he spends his entire arc of the series is chasing the bride, and he's like, my love will know it when she sees it. She's just not ready for my love yet. Mm-hmm. And so like that level of loneliness, granted it's played up to comic effect in Creature Commandos, but that level of loneliness is, I think, an intrinsic value every human has. So you just want someone to spend your time with. When you are different than everybody else, when you feel different than everyone else, and you don't have someone to spend your time with. When someone says, when someone says, I'm going to make someone for you to spend your time with.
Yeah. Okay, especially so let me stop you there. That is the scary fucking part of The Bride, I think, is it's scary enough to make a person out of undead people and say, here, go out into this harsh world. I made you. I'm repulsed by you. Go out into this world and just get fucking screamed at and rocks thrown at you and shit. Tied to trees and jostled around. That's horrifying. It's scary. It's dehumanizing.
Right.
I do think the element of The Bride, though, which is the moment you wake up, it's like, hey, that thing wants you as a Fifi.
Yeah.
Hey, wait, what? I'm fucking 10 minutes old. This is... And her righteous screaming, I think, is like kind of the iconic... Because they do this thing with her in this movie especially. She does the kind of ferret eyes. And she's like... Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. It's like the three quick snaps. And what it made me think of was when you see like small rodents that come out of their like dens and they have to look up to the sky real quick and make sure there's no fucking owls or foxes. And then they try to run and, oh shit, predators hide. So there is something about like that darting, the hair, the scream, as it's like, oh, not only was I just made, I was made to be used and subjugated. That I think really adds an extra layer to the fear of the Frankenstein story.
Yeah, I think that again, like her repulsion is like this weird. I guess I always thought of it as like, oh, it's a brain that was grown. I think this is like sort of the interesting thing too, and this is, and William Hurlbut wrote it. For me, like this is sort of the genius of the writing is so Pretorius, like basically Frankenstein puts together the body. Pretorius though, like has created the brain, like grown the brain. And I think what's interesting is, and this is why the ending is like such a great ending, I think, is particularly because if the grown brain wouldn't know like anything, like it's not like a past lives brain, it's not anything that has memories from who it was. It's a naked brain with no default setting that is horrified by what it sees. So it gives this like extra layer of tragedy to the monster, who's just like, well, fine. This is the one that got built for me, and fuck it, she doesn't even like me. Like, it's this really specific
I love that you're just like, the monster's like, I can't wait 18 years? And he's like fucking blowing all up. Yeah, there's a lot of questions this movie raises, dude. It's crazy.
Okay, I was not going to go that direction with it, but it was more just...
Pretorius is a freak in this movie.
He is, but like, I wasn't going in the direction that you were going with it. I was just saying it's a brain that has no idea what's like ugly versus what's scary versus what's handsome versus
but then it still knows to dive into the arms of Victor Frankenstein and be repulsed by his monster. There is like this weird built-in
That's
prejudice.
What I'm saying. It's like it's a the universality of, how do you say that word? But the universality of like terror doesn't go away. Like whatever that thing is that's from like a primordial human place of fear hasn't gone away. I wouldn't even call it prejudice. It's just it's the lack of knowing something. So it's a lack of understanding. So you just automatically are scared.
Well, there is something too. Like the monster is constructed from dead body parts, and we are inherently at a genetic level meant to be repulsed by dead things, right? It gives a sickness and whatever.
Oh, not only that, he's like fucked
she can't
up dead
see it
body
in
parts.
herself, right? Because she's looking outward.
Yeah.
And so for her to see what will become of her and recoil and scream at, she hates me. And it's like, well, she about to hate herself too, like it's dark and tragic and sad.
Wait till you find out what we did.
Yeah. There's something about the idea of a bride. And I think that like has become more and more, people have taken this further and further, right? Especially with the, Frankenhooker's Bride of Reanimator. There's a lot, Poor Things for sure, where we talk a lot about this, a creature, but a woman version that is designed more specifically with other intents, gives it this extra layer of exploitation, right? That I think you can play with a lot. Because, I think, Poor Things is inarguably a better movie.
Sure.
But, the bride had to scream so that Bella Baxter could, moan. That's how it goes. That's the long arc of history. Okay. Let's talk about Karloff in this movie. It's so funny. I actually just read over Christmas break. I got the Bela Lugosi little graphic novel they did.
It's really good.
It's really good. It's a really fun read if you're like a fan of this era. Yeah. Kind of a sad man, right? Like it was just not like a great run.
Yeah, I read it when I was on a job last year, like when I was back at my hotel, and I was like, wow, this is like the saddest thing I've ever read, but this book is really good.
It is sad, and this is the thing, is that because of his success as Dracula, right? He really fought to get in the film version of Dracula. That's its own like fun history about them filming two Draculas at the same time, right? Mm-hmm. He was going to be the monster, right? Or that was like the rumored thing, and like went as far as makeup and was like, oh, I can't do this. I'm a real actor. Bailed on it, and they got Karloff, and he went on to become maybe the most iconic movie monster of all time.
Twice.
There is a moment in the first Frankenstein where we first see the monster and just those like sunken fucking cheeks and eyes, and they do that weird triple jump cut of just that like zoned out face that are just among the greatest images ever captured on film, right? Like immediately you understand the dark magic that they found in that mix of makeup and actor and director, and it's fucking flawless. It's flawless, right? This movie, because kind of the biggest, most iconic moment I would say from that one is trying to play with the little girl. They run out of flowers, and he throws her in, and she dies, right? Yeah. And that is horrifyingly sad and brutal. A visual way to tell the story of the monster. This one, we really hone in a lot more on that personal journey of the monster. Because this movie picks up right as the last one ends at that burning thing. Essentially, the thing's burning, and he just starts chucking old ladies down the hollow shaft.
Yeah, he's like, fuck this. Ew.
Dude, I love watching him chuck dummies off of things in this movie. It is A+.
It's the best.
Can't get enough. But we don't see a long period where all of this growth seemingly would occur. And how long was he in that blind guy's house? We don't know.
Yeah.
But we're back into a world that tried to burn him. He's down there in the watery underneath, taking in his lot, comes back out, fight. And then he finds an oasis in the middle of this fucking harsh reality. And to me, that's the best segment of the movie. Is when he meets his friend. Yeah,
I think that's, again, it's the growth of a character that you don't really think needs growth, but it's learning it's learning the things that I think that are uncommon to find in especially modern monster movies, where Frankenstein, the monster is a truly tragic figure. And I think that's really sort of the thing that misses a lot of the time, is just like, oh man, like that was, oh man, that shit was scary. You're like, yeah. But also, for some reason, like that sadness, that prevailing sadness is so just like deep in your bones, you know, because you're looking at this monster and you're just like, this poor guy who got just railroaded into having to come back to life. He's sitting there having to deal with all this shit, and I'm just like, good Lord. Like, and
Karloff sells his face is just perfect for every time. So like he escapes that scene where it's like very Jesus-like, where they chain him up and lift him up on that log, right? And like people are jeering at him from through the cell door, and they're like, he's hideous monster in the daylight. And it's like, hey, don't you have some like maid shit to do? Get the fuck out of here. Why are you always in here fucking throwing haymakers? Go fucking milk something. Get out of here.
You really do like hate you really do hate the villagers by the end. It's just like, God,
yeah,
can
and he
we
gets
just
out
pitchfork these guys?
Yes. And he kills people on his way out. We kind of redo the dead girl bit, which is tough, but he's just rampaging to get away from them. And whatever's in his path goes down. So it doesn't have the heft of it, right? But I think in the next two beats, right, where we see him, like, there's a family who's like, yeah, the monster's in jail, it's fine. And he comes out and he's just like, like, he wants some food and he's hurt. He's been shot.
Yeah.
And they immediately scream, and he's immediately in combat. And that moment, I think, is a really small but great reinforcement of the moment he comes across someone, he tries to greet them as another creature who's like, I need help. I need food. He's trying to communicate. They scream in his face and attack him. And he's back to pretty much having to kill people or run for his life. And when he sees the blind guy, and he goes, hey, man, hey, chill the fuck out. I'm over here just fucking strumming my violin. Chill out.
Somebody who's not judging him on his looks.
Right. And again, I think that is such an immediate, like, we, the audience, are just, oh, God, we needed that like, too. That just calming. And it's beautiful because there are some shots in that moment, right, where he's just like, oh, my friend, you can't talk. I wrote some of this down, and he's like, you're a welcome friend, whoever you are. No one will hurt you here. And there's a moment where he touches the monster.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, that's the first time he's known a touch that wasn't aggressive in combat or the creator who turned on him, right? And watching Karloff play that, oh my God, a human touch. And you're hurt and I want to help you. And here, take my food, right? The thing that killed me is when the monster lays down, he's like, "Arr, arr," and he's like done. He's exhausted. Imagine the 25 hours this guy's had, right? And the old man is crying over his bed. And he's like, I prayed for God to send me a friend in my loneliness, right? This guy's life is such that he just needs anyone. And again, that praying to God, right? In a movie that's all about how a scientist played God and his abominable creation that we've all been fucking fighting. And that section of the movie is as beautiful a section of filmmaking as you're likely to find. It's just, it still breaks my heart every fucking time.
It breaks my heart. And then the follow up, like when they start going through, like when he's like, bread and all this stuff. Because I think this is the thing that I love about this scene particularly is there's still that tension of like misunderstanding. Like you're waiting for that like through line.
The monster could go see red for a second and he kills his only friend. Yes.
Well, and so like when he starts, and I love that they don't do this because like again, it's basically it would basically have been a repeat of the little girl in the first one. I'm like, that's like smart because when he lights up the cigar, he's like, I'm like, oh shit, dude, here it goes. Like it's gonna fucking pop off, and it's like, oh no. It's like it's okay, don't worry about it. Like that passing and then him smoking it too is like, oh, it's just like, again, it goes from this like hair trigger moment to this thing being like, oh, see, like even though he's smoking, which kids should never smoke, but that's okay, live your life.
Dude, if you've had a life like this guy, it's okay to pass whatever back and forth with your one friend in the world.
You've fucking put it down. You fucking earned it.
If you've been chased by pitchforks and torches, treat yourself.
It's the thing I like. I think I agree. It is like my favorite scene in the movie, though. Well, like when they're passing, even more than like the bride. The bride is just like it's such a wonderful like back and forth.
Well, not only that, but he has like the kind of thesis of the whole thing, right? What is it? Alone bad, friend good. And you're like, man, if that ain't the human experience, period, is that everything in the world is cold, hard, wants to destroy us. Man, if you just got one person, like a ride or die, that makes all the difference, right? That's why we create families and children and nations and do all these things, is because alone bad, right? On some level, that's probably why Frankenstein started this journey of creating a man, because we feel alone in the presence of God. And it's this perfect little moment. And again, the movie does this weird, like they have this almost like I Love Lucy score throughout the whole movie, which doesn't seem to fit the kind of darker tones of the subject matter. But the movie itself is kind of more lighthearted, to your point, like the smoking. So there is this like I Love Lucy score, and then he's being a goofball. But then it's like when the hunters come to the door, you're like, fuck, here we go.
There are some overtures. There are some overtures in the music. I'm like, all right, it's fine. Like even the ending, I was like, huh. Okay. That's like, cool.
Did they just take the movie over to the stage? They're like, which booth's available? It's like, oh, the jaunty guy? Okay. But yeah, when the hunters break in that door, immediate devastation, heartbreak. We know exactly.
This is the score.
Yeah, the world must take away. And again, in a way that it doesn't take from Frankenstein. And in this movie, Frankenstein getting to come back to life, another run at it, he's now like working with this other guy, and he's kind of immediately like, oh, we can solve it. And you're like, this piece of shit, this motherfucking piece of shit,
Pretorius.
He still hasn't learned anything.
More like Pretorius.
And he gets to just be okay. That's what kills me, is that the monster suffers where Frankenstein should definitely. And you're like, that's just what this movie's about, man. That's it. And again, let me ask you this though, more pointedly. Did the monster talking so much by the end of the movie work for you?
It didn't until his last line. And I'm like, damn, that is the fucking line in the movie right
we
there.
belong dead.
We belong dead.
Yeah,
I was
she
like,
hates me. There was a part of me that was like, I could have never heard him talk again except for, alone, bad, friend, good. But I will say Karloff does, because that's the thing, if that voice doesn't work, that is a tough sell. And I think he did a great job.
I think the last scene, the last thing he says, like, if that was the only thing he said in that last scene, I'm like, cool, great. Like, that was what I wanted. Like, yeah. I don't think it's bad that he talks. I think there's just like, it's that kind of stuff, especially because we're a modern audience.
Yeah.
It feels like a double down. You're like, I don't care about any of that. But I liked
it. Feels, but you just can't get us there without the dialogue.
But, like, that was a great closer. Like, that was a great closer. And then, like, actually, I think the line that fucks up the whole thing is Frankenstein, like, it's okay, darling. Darling. And I'm like, fuck you, dude. Shut up. Like, God.
Yeah, Frankenstein sucks. And the scene I liked was when they switched it. And Frankenstein's like, I need rest. Like a little fucking selfish bitch child he is. And the monster's like, work. And he's like, he's looming over him, and he's like, you fucking make my creation, bitch. I love that Frankenstein gets to be like the fucking shitty middle manager. And then Pretorius is like, hey man, just come over here and crush some gin. He's like, gin. And I was like, what is going on in this movie? But I did like that, but he has this moment where it's always a terror, because I feel like the best Karloff stuff is like when he's running through that beautiful cemetery set. And he's just tipping shit over and trying to crawl back in the grave. And it's like, I love dead, living bad. And you're like, God, man. So, like, both versions of it work so well.
Yeah.
And he's wonderful in this.
It's sparing. It works sparingly.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, it's, again, those lines, like, there are lines that work, and then there's the rest of it. I'm like, why is he talking? Like, I get it.
It's one of those, like, Pandora's box. Like, you got to be careful when you open it, because then you're too tempted to use it. Let's talk about another new addition to the Frankenstein mythology, Dr. Pretorius.
Yeah.
What the fuck was this? This might be one of the weirdest,
it was like the first,
most horrible additions to a franchise, but the actor is so fun.
It's like watching the first To Catch a Predator. You're like, whoa, that guy got caught.
Yeah, dude. Soon as he starts bringing out the glass, because this, dude, you forget. You're like, this is a movie about the Frankenstein experience. No, this guy's like, yeah, I also do that same kind of work. And Frankenstein's like, cool. I almost died. I'll come to your lab. And he's like, here's a little tiny queen, and here's a little Pepe Le Pew rapist king that I have to keep separated. And here's a really mean judgy poet. And it's like, wait, you think this is what I do? You're making fucking 2-inch tall humans that, again, let's not be coy. Why are they kept in those bottles instead of like a gloriously large aquarium? Because they're probably the exact same size as his ass.
Yeah.
Like them bottles and little people are going right into his asshole, dude.
Those are butt plugs that go up. Those are butt plugs that are going up a butt.
Yeah, those are butt bottles.
Like a brony convention. Yeah,
those are butt bottles, dude. I hate to break it to you. There are more than just wine flowing from those bottles. Like, not wine to lips, but little science experiments to fucking sphincters. This guy is so insane, but is gleefully devious in the movie.
Yeah.
I love him, but do think Pretorius is the dumbest thing that they added to this movie by a lot.
Really?
The little people section is so fucking stupid.
I think it's strange to give him... I agree in principle. I think what's dumb is giving him like, oh, I've also been working on like creating people. Yeah. I'm like, excuse me. Frankenstein took a bunch of dead people, made them into one living person.
Yeah.
Like, you are literally making people. I'm like, that's a whole.
Yeah, is he building like tiny cardiovascular systems and lungs and like what?
Yeah. So
what?
I think like his intro, other than being like, I love gin. I'm like, yeah, I can tell.
I do love that he keeps saying like my one weakness, and then he's like hammering smokes, and I was like, this is my kind of guy.
Yeah. Smokes, my one weakness.
That guy like me has never seen a weakness he can't wait to adapt.
we're like two weaknesses away from him saying something highly incriminating. We're like, oh,
Yeah.
This guy.
Ooh, I feel like, the moment he's on his 5th gen and 8 stogie, you'd be like, I gotta get the fuck out of here. I can't be seen at the local fucking pub with this guy.
He's one of those guys that like. Okay, this is a real like this is sort of an inside LA thing, but Griffey knows who these people are. Remember when we'd go to a bar, and like we'd all hang out, like we'd be having a good time. There's always one guy at the bar though who wants to talk about movies, and they want to talk about movies in a way that like it's not about like, oh, I like this movie, I like that movie. It's about a movie and how it relates to how I'm a writer too, so I know a lot about these things. Like that's Pretorius. That's that guy at the bar.
Yeah, but his are just about like horrifying human experiments and sex
that's
stuff.
The thing is like, well, that's the thing is he's like one of those guys who's like, oh, you know, my screenplay, you'd like it a lot actually. Yeah. That's that guy.
That's the guy that's definitely like, he's on his 5th shift that week of scooping Chipotle bowls, and he's like, why don't they understand? Like, I'm right here. I'm the next Christopher Nolan, right? And it's like, hey, dude, all of us at our shitty jobs think we're that guy. We don't need to come to the bar and interview for each other. None of us are the gatekeepers. Just shut up and have fun.
That's Pretorius.
Pretorius is like that, but he's railing against God, not a jaded Hollywood system that doesn't realize he's the next undiscovered Christopher Nolan. Yeah.
At the end of the day, in 1935, what was the difference? I ask.
I think there's a clear difference. Like, you see everyone else in this movie, and there's some annoying, like the Burgermeister, the maid who's never mating. Even Frankenstein and his like fiance seem fucking lame as hell. I think that's just of the era. It's just a lame time for lame people. It is one of those things. Like, there's even a moment where they're like, we think the monster's out there in the woods murdering people. And you see people getting out of bed and they're like, cool, let's go fight him with sticks and shit. And I was like, dude, it must have been so boring back then that these guys were laying next to their wives they can't stand. Everyone smells like shit. They don't get to eat every day. And he's like, oh, fight a monster with a stick? Let's go. I'm running out in my fucking nightgown and boots at 2 a.m. to fucking throw down. I think Pretorius exists in this movie for an odd function. And I want your opinion on this.
Sure.
So we build the bride, right? We see them abduct a new woman and kill her for the body. We put the brain in. We bring the bride in. Frankenstein kills like the helpers for no good reason. He's just mad and throws them off the castle. She wakes up, and we have our iconic scene, right, of her being unwrapped. They pay homage to that in Hellraiser 2, all that shit, right? Great. Loving it. Love the screams. Ah! We kind of talked about how she recoils from the monster and falls into the arms of Frankenstein. I think Pretorius exists in this weird limbo zone of this movie where the only reason he exists is to show us we need Frankenstein to be righteously punished as we destroy these two creations that are not responsible, it feels like, for their own birthing, right? Why does the monster let Frankenstein dip? Just because his girlfriend's screaming at the door?
Okay. Yes, but here's why. Because he learns from his friend.
Okay.
Like, truly, like, no one should be alone. He sees Frankenstein is not alone. Like, Frankenstein, like, makes the cardinal sin of playing God. Frankenstein has learned his lesson. And he sees that Frankenstein, and then the monster knows, like, because the monster helped Pretorius, like, kidnap the girl and everything like that. He's like,
to be fair, they were working before the abduction. Like, Frankenstein didn't need a ton of fucking massaging.
No, but he's also a kid. He's also, it's like a giant. You know,
that is true. He looks like a 50-year-old actor, but Frankenstein's like pretty fresh out of college in the story.
Yeah. So it's about, like, there's a level of learning right from wrong. It's like, this man made a mistake, but at the same time, like, he's not alone. Like, he's made a mistake. He's paying for his mistake, but he's also not alone. Like, I can see that now. And he looks at Pretorius, he's like, whoa, that is like the apex predator version of what this guy is.
Well, he's like, that's what becomes of a Frankenstein that doesn't have, like, maidens lined up everywhere.
Yeah.
Pretorius is just, like, fucking sloshed on the steps, having his 8th fucking swig of gin. He's like, hey, what are we doing? Nobody there.
You're like, that guy could not be alive anymore. Like, again, I think...
It's like, have you smelled those bottle collections? Like, we must stop this beast. Did he not let those little people go to start a David the Norm Forest community? Or did he know that the little king was such a rapist it was just not going to work?
I think that it really boils down to... It really does boil down to, like... he sees a person who sees the error of his ways. Like, it's about admitting fault and being wrong. And I think that is so, like, that is like the key thing that the monster learns about being human. It's like humans have we have our faults. But Frankenstein admitted he was wrong. He was doing this to protect. He wasn't doing this again because out of sheer playing of God. He wanted to do it again because he wanted to protect what he loved. And I think that's like a key thing that, whether they say it or not, Frankenstein just, the monster just learns.
Yeah, it's the movie of humanizing the monster, and in this moment he shows some graciousness. He forgives his creator for the sins he has suffered, because now he is directly responsible for having created this bride who is repulsed by him, and he sees another creature that should not exist, who will suffer, who will be used, who will be abused. And I think in that moment he understands a little more the folly of Victor. I do think it's not super well played in the movie, and that Victor is kind of played as a kid who's still a little bit excited, and then just at the very end is no.
He does it on purpose. Like, he's like, oh, he's like a little, it's like another experiment. He's like, he shouts, it's alive again.
Yeah, once you got the bug, it's hard to probably turn it off. And Pistorius like, I knew this was coming, so I've abducted your girlfriend. Right. It's like, all right, man. But I love it for the monster. And this is the thing that's odd about this movie, is I think the stuff with the monster is great. The stuff with the two scientists sucks the balls. And not in a fun way, like having those little 2-inch collection of people that could do it. And then I think the bride, it's funny to me that it's called the Bride of Frankenstein, and how iconic she has become, considering she is, at best, the hood ornament of this movie.
Is there anything more, like, misogynistic than calling a movie The Bride of Frankenstein and the woman is in it for, like, 20 seconds?
The fucking slump buster of Frankenstein. It's like, damn, dude. Come on now. Like, give her some fucking dignity. Yeah, and again, I do think it's of the era, right? And this is Karloff's movie. But, and I think that's why when we make this movie today, you see Poor Things, right? Which is a lot more about her taking the power from the things that the men think are weaknesses in her, right? Their assumption that she's dumb, and so she just starts reading everything and becomes a genius. And that they want to sexually abuse her while she is too mentally fresh to defend them. So then she becomes a sex goddess and takes it from them, right? Like, the modern version of this is more fair to the women characters, but again, what Elsa Lanchester did with that movie for the very brief moment she was in, she fucking ate. And dude, almost 100 years later, I have that fucking poster up in my house, right? I watch that scene all the time. I love seeing Bride of Frankenstein, anything. She did it. She transcended. She is immortal, right? She is not dead like everything else in that movie. Her and Karloff have lived on forever. Thankfully, we've mostly all forgotten about Pretorius, though. It's weird. He's even less creepy than the Pretorius in From Beyond. Because Dr. Pretorius in From Beyond isn't hiding his freak flag. He's just like, don't come into my creepy Spencer's Gifts room and no weird shit will happen to you.
Yeah, I mean, again, lesson learned. Like, if you're going to name a guy Pretorius, like, be aware that he's probably...
What comes not long after that is a rap sheet. That is the order. If
like
you name your child
Pretorius. Like I said, Pretorius, more like Predatorius, my friends.
Damn! Mustard! That's what my kids do now. They just scream mustard into the ether. Although this is going to be out in a while, so I don't know if people will still be yelling mustard. But what a time to be alive.
That's a Kendrick Lamar thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Once your kids hit the internet, it's like they are learning new languages, like me on Red Note, as I just bow to the Chinese Communist Party instead of the American Communist Party. Neither here nor there. This was fun. Didn't expect all the TikTok talk. It's a big deal. We're a day or two away. We're a day away from finding out what happened. So you'll know in the future. It won't be that exciting to you anymore. Thanks for your time. Go to MisfitParade.com. Go to Misfit Parade's YouTube. Subscribe there. Messed Up Movies Podcast Patreon. So lots of fun stuff, guys. The Black Mirror miniseries is kicking off. Please, please, please go over there, support the show. More than anything, thank you for your time. We'll see you Friday for a wonderful filmmaker conversation.
Be safe.